Lumped in with the nu metal genre, TRUSTcompany would emerge on people's radars in the new millennium thanks to their major label debut, The Lonely Position of Neutral, which featured their best-known song, Downfall. While the members aspired to be signed to a major label early on in their life, once they hit that feat, the realities of the music business soon set in, and it resulted in the band having a pretty short life with a major label backing them. Today, let's take a look at what happened to the band TRUSTcompany. Frontman and guitarist Kevin Palmer would write on his website about his musical dreams from a young age, saying, "From the time I was about 15 years old, the only thing I dreamed about was getting signed to a major record label and touring the world with my band. To say that I was obsessed with making it big may have been an understatement. It was literally all I thought about 24/7. I used to lay in my bed at night and close my eyes and imagine that I was on a tour bus, in my bunk, headed to the next town on some big tour." Palmer would admit on an AMA on Reddit that during the 80s his biggest influences were Guns N' Roses and Skid Row, but by the 90s he soon got into bands like Helmet and Deftones. Side note guys, I've done a whole video on the career of Helmet, the link is down below. The roots of TRUSTcompany were planted in 1997 by Palmer and drummer Jason Singleton, who met at the age of 17 in Montgomery, Alabama. They originally started out as a 3-piece band before expanding to a 4-piece and used the moniker 41 Down, adding guitarist James Fakai and bassist Josh Motes. It was during their formative years the band members still had regular day jobs, so they would start practicing on weeknights and played shows on the weekend across the Southeast. Singleton would tell the Deseret News, "We came from Montgomery, Alabama, and there weren't a lot of places to play. Places would be open for only a short time and then close after a couple of weeks, so we wound up playing all over the Southeast." The focus of the band from the get-go was to get signed to a major label, and in order to do that, they didn't really focus on playing cover tunes, but rather focused on writing their own songs and getting a lot of live shows under their belt. The band would end up sending out their demos to all the major record labels around 2001, many of whom responded back with rejection letters. However, there was one label, an indie outfit in Washington, D.C. called Cite Records, that showed interest in the band and flew down to Alabama to see them perform live. Impressed with what they saw, they offered the band a recording contract, and Palmer would recall on his website, "When our demo started making the rounds to all the labels back in 2001, there was one song that everyone kept talking about. We got feedback from multiple sources telling us that we had a hit song on our hands. This song was the main reason that both Decide Records and Geffen Records signed us. Everyone around us was telling us that this song was going to change everything for us. It wasn't Downfall." The song he was referring to would be the track Hover, and it was during the band's early days before they got signed that they uploaded their music to Napster, and Hover was consistently their most downloaded song. They soon started getting messages from fans in other countries like Japan, with Singleton telling Deseret News, "We get emails asking us when we'd be touring Japan, and we responded by saying as soon as we get a major deal and more money." The band soon headed into the studio in Florida to record their debut album for their new label. It was following the completion of the album the band hit the road to build buzz around their first record. But their label Decide Records opted not to put out the album and instead shopped it around to major labels, something the members looking back admitted may have been Decide's plan the whole time. Decide would end up setting up live showcases for the major labels on both the East and West Coast, and Geffen Records ended up signing 41 Down after seeing them perform only 2 songs. It was following their signing with Geffen Records they soon changed their name to TRUSTcompany, not wanting to be confused with Canadian band Sum 41. They also hit the studio with Linkin Park, Eve 6, and Lit producer Don Gilmore to polish up that record they had previously recorded for Decide. Palmer would reveal during an AMA on Reddit, "When Geffen signed us, they had every intention of pushing us to radio, but most of the songs were too long for radio. The first thing we did after signing with Geffen was start pre-production with Don Gilmore. The first day of pre-production was when we painfully found out that our songs would need to change some to make them a little bit more radio friendly. It did not go over well with us. During this time, the band wrote about nearly half a dozen new songs that would end up on their major label debut." Palmer would reflect back on signing with Geffen, saying, "The deals were fair, but the debt they put us in could have been easily avoided. We were put in the most expensive studio in LA for 3 months. Our first music video cost us in the neighborhood of $250,000 to shoot, and we were touring in a tour bus before we ever sold one record. At the time, it was exhilarating and exciting, but looking back, it made it nearly impossible to recoup, and it all could have been done for much, much less. The band's first album, The Lonely Position of Neutral, would come out in July of 2002, and while the band expected Hover to be released as the lead single, they soon learned that newer bands typically don't lead things off with a ballad, so the heavier song Downfall was chosen as the first single. Downfall would prove to be a big hit and become the band's best-known song, peaking at number 6 on the mainstream rock charts, and even crossed over to the Hot 100 charts, peaking at number 91. The song helped the group's debut album sell 80,000 copies in its first week, charting at number 11 on the album charts. The band's first major tour saw them open for Puddle of Mudd, and they also played as part of the Warped Tour and toured alongside Korn in Europe. It was during their time in Europe they were informed by their label that their second single would not be Hover, but rather the heavier tune Running From Me. The band disagreed with the label's decision, but Geffen's explanation was that they wanted to establish Trust Company as a heavy band before releasing a ballad. Geffen promised to release Hover as the third single. Running From Me dealt with the disillusion of Palmer's first marriage. He'd been married since he was 18, and by the time he was 26, his ex-wife made the abrupt decision to end their union. Much of the material on the group's debut album was inspired by the end of his marriage. With him recalling to MTV, I wrote a lot about it because it consumed me for that period of time. Running From Me would end up underperforming on both rock radio and MTV, and no third single was issued by the label. The album was done in Geffen's eyes, despite the fact that it sold 500,000 copies going gold. Palmer would reflect back on the album's performance, telling MTV News, "When the first album didn't sell as well as it was expected to, suddenly we weren't their precious little band anymore. We had to really struggle to be noticed, and it became extremely frustrating." By the summer of 2003, the band would hit the studio once again with Don Gilmore, but the resulting album named True Parallels would be stuck in limbo for many months, while Geffen was undergoing changes, including merging with another label. Palmer would tell MTV News in 2005, "We heard 50 million rumors that we were going to get dropped. That gave us a glimpse of the whole other side of the music business. Everything's about writing the big single, and that creates a lot of stress when you're just trying to make a good album." It was during the downtime waiting for things to get sorted out with their label that the members headed back to Montgomery and wrote some new material, resulting in the song Stronger, which would end up being the first single from their second record. True Parallels would eventually be released in March of 2005, and despite little to no promotion from their label, the album did decent, peaking at number 32 on the album charts. In late 2005, the band took a hiatus after Geffen opted not to put out a second single from the record. Palmer and bassist Josh Motes would start a band named Amity Lane. In 2007, Trust Company would re-emerge, and in 2011 put out their third album, Dreaming in Black and White. Since 2011, the band hasn't been very active on the touring circuit or on social media, but in more recent years they have teased that a new album is coming, and the band has announced that they are going to be doing a one-off show later this year at the Blue Ridge Rock Festival in Alton, Virginia. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. We'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.